Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you for your contribution, insight, and wishes. And I think what you said about the fresh thinking, absolutely, we need one. And I hope that civil society and NGO is very well placed to make it fresh in way of thinking. But I am already happy to give the floor to Krzysztof Bobinski, who is co-chair of the steering committee of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. We will have now two larger plenary sessions, and then after the lunch will be the working groups breakout sessions. And of course, once more, I can just invite everybody to actively participate. As actually, Forum, what Krzysztof is representing, has been a very important partner for us, and also, of course, very important partner in engaging civil society in the region and keeping together both European NGOs and Eastern Partnership countries' NGOs. And I think it's a very important task and very important achievement. Krzysztof will be moderating the opening panel on civil society as strategic stakeholder in the Eastern Partnership. Krzysztof, the floor is yours.
Okay, and the first thing is that the microphone is working, which is always a success. I have some housekeeping notes for you. This conference is web streamed on the official website of the Latvian EU presidency, www.eu2015.lv, and on our partners' pages. You can tweet us using hashtag EAPCSC, and the speakers will be talking from 7 to 8 minutes each. The subject of this panel is in your program notes. As the Prime Minister has asked us to be vocal and vibrant, I'd just like to add, from my point of view, I think I ought to introduce myself. I'm from Poland. I live in Warsaw. I'm Polish, but by an accident of history, I was born in Great Britain and brought up in Great Britain, and this explains my accent. What I'd just like to add to the program notes that it has to be said that the situation of NGOs worldwide is not good. The situation of civil society organizations is not good. There was an article in The Economist quite recently pointing out that in India, for instance, NGOs are under attack. In Asia, they're under attack. Of course, they're under attack in Russia. In Tiraspol, in Little Tiraspol, the security police has gone after one of our organizations, Promolex. It's actually quite interesting because the authorities in Tiraspol are illegitimate and they are accusing Promolex of trying to undermine their legitimate authority. Governments are unhappy with foreign donors. Governments have realized that, or have suddenly come to the conclusion that foreign donors are some kind of threat to them and threat to the values which they represent. Interestingly, the most authoritarian governments are unhappy about the values that foreign donors represent. But of course, sometimes they got it wrong. In Baku, they went after Oxfam, for instance, which was very strange. The dialogue between civil society and the EU and their partner, their own governments, is also in trouble. The other day, our Belarusian national platform put out a very strong statement saying that really maybe the whole process should be put under control of civil society, which I think is going a bit too far, but it shows the frustration that there is of a national platform which no one is really talking to, and they ask themselves, what is the point of having a national platform if no one talks to them, the government, not much the European institutions, etc. In Azerbaijan, you're all very aware of the situation. They're using the time-tried formula of the secret police, which is to scare a few people, to bribe a few people, and the rest will fall into line. We have a problem with Russia, which is behaving like we had a grandmother, but I would say that Russia is behaving like a large and scary mother-in-law who will not let go. Keeps coming back, comes into the kitchen, tries to educate the children, keeps on looking into the bedroom, just will not go away. And I think that the way to deal with this, as with, I don't know if it's mother-in-laws, but anyway, with Russia, is that the European Union, the European institutions must absolutely respect the sovereignty of the partner states and the sovereignty of the agreements which they've come to with the partner states. We must not allow Russia to fiddle with the DCFTAs. We must not allow them to take part in these talks. Because, as history shows, the only reason that Russia will do this was to spoil things. Russia is a barrier to change. Oligarchs are a barrier to change. I don't need to expand on that. And just to end up, my hope is probably in vain, but I still hope that a membership perspective for the 3 DCFTA countries will appear in the communique of the summit at the end of this week. The membership perspective is actually in the association agreement, so it's very strange that these 2 words will not appear in the communique. We need a commitment on visas for Ukraine and for Georgia. We need to look at the need for a security dimension in the Eastern Partnership Program for civil society, if not more, not elsewhere. And finally, we need to look at the role that the OSCE plays in this as an institution which does have Russia as a member and therefore is very much hamstrung. Thank you very much. Now, that's me. Now I move to our speakers. We have a very good and expert panel. And we could start with Sandra Kalniete, a member of the European Parliament and a former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Latvia. Ms. Kalniete, the floor is yours.
And now, yes, perfect. Madam Prime Minister, ambassadors, dear all, I belong to those who, by my own experience, I strongly believe that civil society is, in Eastern Partnership countries, is the best ally of Europe. Civil society and civil society organizations are the strongest allies of the Eastern Partnership and the strongest advocates for the change and for the European choice of their nations. Euromaidan is the ultimate example of this. If not for the Ukraine's civics activists who were ready to take risks to life and limb for European values and European choice, today it would be a much different Eastern Partnership Summit and it would be a much different Europe. So first of all, my deepest respect and appreciation and gratitude goes to those brave Ukrainian women and men whom I've seen on the Maidan and who risked and lost their lives for human dignity and civil rights. That is the brightest example after the fall of Soviet Union when a nation takes its destiny in its own hands. I also, oh, thank you. That goes to our Ukrainian friends. Whenever I hear the complaint that Eastern Partnership does not deliver, that it is fading slowly out, one of the positive responses I give, but look, pro-EU civil society is main achievement of Eastern Partnership. Emergence of pro-democratic, pro-European civil society in Eastern European countries is perhaps the most important thing that the Eastern Partnership has achieved, besides economic and other dimensions. EU facilitated it by providing modest funding, really modest funding, but more important, by providing a legal and political framework for more accountable government. Some governments in the region are not happy about it, and they aligned with the, and then there are those who aligned with the pro-European reform agenda championed by the civil society. But in any case, the Eastern Partnership has built a constituency in civil society that remains its strongest ally. And this has been done without granting a lot of money. Only a small share of the Eastern Partnership funding, which is around 5%, goes to supporting civil society activities. And I regret that even these programs give preference to larger projects, often run by multinational NGOs, leaving smaller, often local groups with less management capacity behind. That's why whenever I'm meeting with Commissioner Hahn, I definitely advocate for more funding for soft projects in the Eastern neighborhood and for more flexibility and more freedom for EU delegations to make granting decisions and for going beyond the usual suspects as recipients of these grants, for ever enlarging the coverage of civil society activities with modest but still funding. Money is only a small part of the transformation process. The most powerful short-term benefit that the EU can, and I underline, should offer is greatest freedom of movement. This is something what people expect in Georgia, in Ukraine. Visa liberalization remains powerful means of facilitating positive democratic change and catalyst for the reform process in the countries. Therefore, I have joined the numerous calls for making a high-level commitment to visa-free regime with Ukraine and Georgia, and for further visa facilitation with Belarus, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Of course, I understand that these countries have to meet the technical requirements, as well as it requires certain political decisions. I'm convinced that both dimensions, technical and political, are of same importance, and European leaders and nations have to show more political will in granting this freedom of movement. This is a sort of carrot that the European Union has, and overwhelming majority of people in the Eastern Partnership countries want. So we can use whenever we ask more for more or less for less. I know that those countries who signed association agreements, they expect from European leaders a clear language on European perspective. Unfortunately, the European, in several European member states, enlargement during the last 5 years became a no word. But what I would advocate very strongly with those associated countries, that they make themselves ready. They have the good news is that they already have membership action plan, which is called association agreement. By implementing these plans, they are good both for building stronger nations and for making case for the EU negotiations. This is something what Latvia did in the context of NATO. All the time it was repeated in the couloirs, no, it's not the right moment for Latvia to join NATO, and maybe never will be. But we were not listening to these voices. We prepared ourselves, and when finally the door opened just a little, we immediately stepped in, and now we are in NATO. The same will be with Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova, and other nations if they will show their strong will regarding European Union. But it will take time, patience, political will to reform, and civil society has a particular role in monitoring and advocating the implementation of association agreements. I believe that precisely civil society have to prepare their own progress reports, and European institutions have to take them very seriously when they are preparing the progress report on countries' advancement in European integration. I will briefly mention corruption and oligarchization, which is a flaw to fight, and it's very hard to fight. Even 25 years after Latvia restored independence and 10 years since we joined European Union, we are not free, entirely free from corruption and from political trafficking and political influence. That's why I ask also you from civil society be very very insistent on that point, because for years and years we in the European Union, we did not take seriously, for example, how money was slandered in Ukraine, all the reports made by civil society activists. And finally, in 2013, at the end, 14, in the beginning, it turned out to be true. Suddenly, we in the Union, we noticed it. And my two last points. The first, about the eternal temptation which exists between realpolitik and values. There always has been we always have to find the right balance between realpolitik and values. And civil society has a particular role whenever politicians are overstepping that fine line which lies between compromise and betrayal of values. You have to remind and you have to raise your voice very strongly, because what is at stake, these are the basic principles of democracy, and European countries strive because we are truly democratic societies. And the last, all my sympathies goes to political prisoners, those brave men and women who are fighting for their civil rights at the price of their own freedom. And this is a particular point where no compromise is possible between the European Union and our eastern neighborhood countries. There we have to apply a true conditionality, more for more, less for less. Thank you, and I wish you a very fruitful discussions in this important forum.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for keeping to your time. Just a small remark about realpolitik and values. I have a feeling that values are a part of realpolitik. There isn't, if you have politics which are conducted without values, then it's not very sensible. The next speaker is Oleh Rybachuk, who's in the vocal and vibrant category. He was a former Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine with responsibility for EU integration. Actually, I'm wondering if Ukraine now has a Deputy Prime Minister with responsibility for European integration.
Not yet.
No, yet. Well, I wish you all the best. If you're applying, please.
I am not, but...
And now he's a civil society activist. Please, Oleh.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister, and thank you, Latvia, for being our host today, because it's very symbolic for me. I know that Baltic countries were the last one to be forced and the first one to force yourself out of this strange family of brotherly sisterhood of the Soviet Union, because Soviet republics have been always pictured by Soviet propaganda as beautiful lady sisters, but relations have been called brotherly. Paradoxically, but you are really inspiring. I do remember personally how you've been standing against that Kremlin machine in the first months of collapse of the Soviet Union, and how bravely you withstood through the energy blackmail, through cold winters, and you made it. You are now very proud to be members both of EU and NATO. And that is, believe me, very inspiring for us. We know that in order to achieve independence, you have to pay dearly for it. So much was told about Ukrainian civil society. I'm not going to add to more vibrant is the word which most often is used. We are vibrant. Our vibrations shook down a very authoritative regime of President Yanukovych, and our vibrations are felt even in Brussels from time to time. And here I would like to come back to my impressions of dealing with Brussels in the capacity of Deputy Prime Minister, and since 2007 in the civil society. Okay, with Brussels bureaucracy and governmental bureaucracy, it's more or less clear, but it's much more challenging. And from my point of view, I was genuinely amused by who is counterpart of Eastern Partnership civil society or civil society at large. When I moved into that world, that was my first experience, and I was rather naive, maybe romantic, imagining that there must be something like us, like Ukrainian civil society. There must be this kind of pan-European entity. First time I was invited to one of the conferences, it was in Ukraine. And that was conference organized by Economic and Social Committee. I never came across them before that. It was in one of the five-star hotels in Kyiv. The mood surprised me very much because there were lots of Ukrainian speakers whom I couldn't associate with civil society. And then I started opening up myself how it looked like from Brussels' point of view. So this, from Brussels' point of view, civil society mostly consists of employers, trade unions, and others. I was invited in that capacity of the others, and that was like maybe 5 years ago. And then really surprises came after surprises. Ukraine that time was represented, and the ECOSOC felt very comfortable dealing in Ukraine on the Kuchma days, because from Ukrainian side, Ukrainian part of civil society was obviously represented by employers, by trade unions, and by deputies of ministers, who replaced the others. And when I questioned, well, I understand, but how comes, why? I remember indignant remark of somebody from Ukrainian nomenclature saying, oh, you believe deputy ministers are not citizens? They don't have citizens' right? So this is how my acquaintance with Brussels' understanding of what is civil society started. I honestly tried to create kind of interacting mechanism. I spent a couple of years talking to these ECOSOC people, moving into Brussels, negotiating with Ukrainian trade unions and Ukrainian employers unions. They recognized me because I was top-level government officials. For them, I was an authority. So they recognized me as the others, but one of them. So we reached certain progress there, but then when I dropped out, because Brussels clearly turned it into never-ending negotiations where I felt that knowing these faces of Ukrainian trade unions, you must know, maybe in Latvia you had better ones, but in Ukraine they've been never and ever defending the rights of people. So when they ask you how many members do you have in your own organization, and they say we have 5 million, we have 10 million, and Brussels having mirror representation there, I saw very familiar faces from post-Soviet countries. I am pretty sure post-Soviet trade union leaders under those glorious days, sitting now in Brussels and feeling quite comfortable dealing with this kind of civil society like Ukrainian. And Ukrainian civil society, Ukrainian academicians, we have so many trade unions representing government and different sectors of people's economy. And they told me, oh, Mr. Rybachuk, we are for decades dealing with Brussels. We developed so good relationship, so we know how to deal. And I do believe them. They've been happily meeting on a regular basis for decades. But in Ukraine, and still I believe in Ukraine civil society, is this the others. I didn't see massive riots of trade unions or employers when we were dying for freedom. I didn't see them on Maidan. I didn't see them protesting before that against massive killings. Oh yeah, I saw some of them, minors, just a few weeks ago, brought in Kyiv by Akhmetov because his business was attacked. So if this practice continues, and if our counterpart in Brussels would be thinking in those categories, next delegation of Ukrainians may arrive by just 2 private jets. One jet would be led by Mr. Firtash, who is now representing employers in Ukraine, spending some millions on advocates in Vienna, fighting against extradition out to the States. Second could be Renat Akhmetov, who will bring trade unions. So there would be very lovely and comfortable for Brussels discussions where in company of Renat Akhmetov and Firtash you can discuss the oligarchization of Ukraine. That is quite realistic scenario. I hope this is not going to happen, but seriously speaking, this is the challenge. Because with all the role civil society plays in Ukraine, one of the major questions you've been asking, how civil society can have more influence on Eastern neighborhood or on EU policy, so on whom are we going to influence? Who will be representing civil society of Ukraine? That's the question. And who will be elected next year, I just simply don't know. But actually, I don't care much. I know that the others, are still the vibrant and very driving force in Ukraine. The others are now imposing and causing reforms in Ukraine, and we are very natural allies. Because if we are serious, and we are serious about making Ukraine a European state, that is absolute priority from the most active citizens of Ukraine. Many of them are present here, and are we partners? Are we strategic partners? Are we not strategic partners? We don't care. We are going to do what we are doing. I was in the States when civil society was proclaimed strategic partner of United States. I came there on other reason, and then they asked me to stay, and I was in the company of Hillary Clinton, and that was very grandiose, showing the civic activists from all over the world represented in the State Department, live report in 50 countries, but still, frankly, that later on civil society was proclaimed strategic partner of Europe. Still, frankly, I don't understand what changed, what make it different. What does it actually mean, strategic partnership? In my understanding, it means involvement and crucial say in policies making and in decision making. That means creating those joint venture structures where civil society of Ukraine, which absolutely shares values of European values and which prove that, could have very serious role in not only drafting laws, which are doing now anyway, but in dealing with government in such a way that government would not be able to ignore it or to take it to notice and forget about it. We are doing that anyway, but I think that combination of EU and donors who do have money and Ukrainian civil society who knows how to control that money is not wasted is the best unbeatable combination. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rybachuk, thank you very much. I can assure you that nothing much has changed with ECOSOC. And just to say a word in defense of the other institutions in Brussels, they are much, much better. ECOSOC, we're now dealing with ECOSOC about the DCFTA arrangements. It's a bit like a very old octopus, actually, that you just can't, but it's still there and will stay there, you feel, for a long time. But they are very pleased with themselves. They think they're doing a good job. Anyway, I apologize to representatives of ECOSOC who are here, but it has to be said. Can we move to the next speaker, which is Oleh Bialiatski, Bialiatski, unfortunately a former political prisoner, chairman of the Belarusian Human Rights Center Vyasna and vice president of the International Federation for Human Rights in Belarus. We're very happy that you are no longer a political prisoner, and I'm afraid there are still a few political prisoners in Belarus, and I hope that they will be released very, very soon, because it really is a waste of time and money to keep them in prison. Mr. Bialiatski.
Я буду говорить по-русски.
I will speak Russian. I'd like to thank, first of all, my colleagues, the representatives of the NGOs from various countries of the Eastern Partnership, because I have felt your help and support for all those years when I was in prison. It is an extraordinary case when the wheel turns into real action. And in June last year, I was just thrown out of the Bobroisk imprisonment camp. And that is, of course, a very positive example that shows that if we want to achieve something altogether, we can do that. I hope that at the next our meeting, my colleagues and friends from Azerbaijan will sit at the same place. Those who are now over the last year have gone to prison. When I was in prison, I received photos of Tigam Aliyev with my T-shirt. When I came out, he went to jail. So it means that, again, all together, we have to strive for liberation of our friends and colleagues. This all shows how much the situation in our countries is not stable, how quickly it changes. If we just remember when the Eastern Partnership was created in Prague, I was there back then, maybe some of you also. Then there was this formula 5+1, when 5 countries were approximately at the same level of development of democracy and attempts to contact the European democracy, and Belarus was something lagging behind. Over the last years, a lot of important changes took place. And this formula has changed. So now it means 3+1+2. It means that there are countries that had made a serious breakthrough in order to come closer to the European community of nations. In fact, they made some heroic efforts. They came through wars, human loss, lots of suffering. And it is clear that these countries have to receive some clear signal from the European Union, namely that they do have a European perspective, because they have been paying a very big price for that and are still paying it. Understanding of this situation makes us hope that the former countries of the Soviet family of nations that can be called the prison of nations. The Russian Empire and the Soviet Union was sometimes called the prison of nations. So I think that these, our former colleagues from this prison of nations, better understand the situation in which we are now. And so they have a kind of moral obligation of helping those 3 countries that right now are evidently eager to enter the family of the European nations. Well, it is unclear what is happening with Armenia, who wants to make friends with everybody, which is not possible. It is clear that sooner or later they will have to make this choice. And I think that the role of the civil society in defining this choice in Armenia will be very important in the next years to come. The situation in Azerbaijan has deteriorated over the last 3-4 years, and Now the last dictator of Europe, Alexander Lukashenko, has given this honorable status to other presidents of Europe. He is maybe the third in Europe because Ilham Aliyev has overtaken him. There are more than 100 political prisoners in Azerbaijan. The civil society is broken down. The free media is being prosecuted. Some tragic events are taking place there when the civil society is being destructed even as we speak. And Ilham Aliyev, at the same time, tomorrow most probably will be in the building of the National Library of Latvia. And so how to square this circle is not really clear to me. What are the clear criteria of value treatment toward the countries of the authoritarian regimes who are members of the Eastern Partnership? This applies to Belarus and Azerbaijan. They also have to be present, these value criteria. We cannot give some privilege, some advantages, improvement of relations to countries where the situation does not improve or even deteriorate with regard to human rights and economic freedoms. Well, the economic cooperation goes through different tools, not through the Eastern Partnership. However, the Eastern Partnership helps to launch them. And even with those limited resources that are accessible to the Eastern Partnership, sometimes reach the civil society. In Belarus, for example, it's 10% of the total Eastern Partnership financing. So the question is, who are the natural allies of the European Union in our countries? I think that naturally it is the civil society, because the civil society is the active pro-European part of our nation. It is the locomotive that is pulling our country into the European community. So the Eastern Partnership should not turn into a mechanism of support of authoritarian regimes. It should be an instrument of protection of European values and support to those parts of society, the civil society, that share these values. The Eastern Partnership should be a platform of support of democracy and human rights in our countries. The policy of involvement of countries into value initiatives doesn't work. The history also confirms that in recent Europe. Let's remember Salazar or Franco regime. Both Portugal and Greece did not have freedom. The same applies to the Baltic states when they were inside the Soviet Union. Those regimes were an alternative to what Europe was building and to values on which the European Union based its life. And it was only after the fall of those regimes that these countries could finally join the EU and its value. Now we can see that Azerbaijan has been pulled into the Council of Europe, and we don't know what to do now, because Azerbaijan now flagrantly breaches the rules of this Council of Europe. So we should not follow what our authorities say. We should not believe their words. We should follow their speech. We should look at their hands, so to say. Now coming back to the advanced countries about which I talked. We now remember the very sad experience of Ukraine after the Orange Revolution, when we all believed that Ukraine would be able to follow the European road, and we all remember the pain that came after the Orange Revolution, and that was the negative role of the civil society. So I would really like if our hopes that we place on Ukraine, on its civil society, could come to life. We should keep our government accountable, especially when the situation is not stable, when billions of dollars are lost not only in Ukraine but also in Moldova. So how can we keep this in line with our attempt to keep these countries close. So we have to be a kind of a monitor, of a watchdog. As regards Belarus and Azerbaijan, of course, the relations between the authorities and the civil societies is a good marker. If there are political prisoners, as in Belarus and Azerbaijan, as if media and internet are restricted, if the civil activists and non-governmental organizations are persecuted, if there is no freedom of election, as in Belarus and Azerbaijan, then we have to make conclusions. We should not finance these regimes. We should support the civil society and free media in our countries. Although our countries are moving away, so to say, you have to remember that we are in different conditions. But it is clear that the solidarity between the civil society of our countries and the horizontal links are the prerequisite that can give us some optimism about the future. Thank you very much.
Nothing to be added, really. The next speaker is Mr. Ambassador Juris Poikāns, the Ambassador at Large for Eastern Partnership. Listen carefully, because in my experience, everything you say makes sense. So, but all our speakers are very good, of course. Please.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, allow me at first to welcome all participants in the Society Conference and express my special gratitude to the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum and Latvian institutions which were engaged in preparing this event. I'm not a civil society activist and actually not planning to be, I think, in a foreseeable future. So let me provide a bit different perspective looking from the presidency or the Latvian government. Let me paint the picture what I see when it comes to the Eastern Partnership and how I see the role of civil society in this regard. 1.5 years has passed since Vilnius, since the last summit, and it has been mentioned already several times here. I believe we have a very mixed picture when it comes to the Eastern Partnership. I think one of the key achievements since Vilnius is, and it has been mentioned here several times, we have 3 association agreements with Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. I believe really, truly revolutionary documents, and really the necessary instruments to change these countries. And at the same time, I think it's extremely important that we don't abandon Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus. These are very important countries of the Eastern Partnership and very good friends of Latvia and the European Union as well. At the same time, I think one of the key features what we see since Vilnius, which started already in Vilnius, that free and sovereign policy choices of the partner countries have been challenged. This is quite obvious. We have alternative integration format on the European continent called Eurasian Economic Union, which means you have 2 integration notions at the same time. Europe is divided on that. 1.5 years since Vilnius, it's good news that we don't have Mr. Yanukovych. I believe many Ukrainians will agree with me, but Crimea is not a part of Ukraine anymore, and you have a nearly frozen conflict in Donbass. At the same time, I'm very much thrilled by the active civil society in Ukraine and specifically Maidan. So you have a very mixed picture, as I mentioned at the very beginning. I think the next 2-3 years for the Eastern Partnership are extremely crucial. And I think the success of the Eastern Partnership very much lies within the gradual implementation of the association agreements with Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. And I would like to stress these 3 countries because they have made the European choice. They want to come closer to Europe. And as they have decided to embark upon this road, it means we should provide as much support as possible. From my point of view, the core task of civil society in these 3 countries, and by civil society I mean what Mr. Rybachuk said, these others, not Akhmetov's trade unions, is ensuring, monitoring and independent control of the implementation of association agreements. And this will be very difficult, because the association agreements, being truly revolutionary, at the same time will be applied to the countries which have a deep Soviet legacy, with all their deficiencies. So it means carrying out reforms will be extremely difficult. It will require enormous efforts. And I think what I would like to wish to the civil society in these three countries, being strong and not to fall into fatigue, something that happened in 2004. Because without civil society, without independent control, it will be impossible to break the bone of corruption, to improve the justice system. So these years will be very crucial for your own countries and at the same time for the Eastern Partnership and the European Union as well. And another thing which I believe is very important, that was mentioned by Mr. Bialiatski as well. Clearly, civil society is one of the key drivers of European integration, European ideas. And what sometimes concerns me, when you look at the countries of Eastern Partnership, you get a feeling that the countries what really they want. It's about sometimes who will offer what. And when you look even in the countries where you have a strong pro-European sentiments, you have a considerable amount of population who believe that another integration format can offer something more. I believe this is up to the countries of Eastern Partnership, up to the Ukrainian, Georgian, Moldovan societies to decide what are your future interests, what are your key interests. Your foreign policy priorities cannot change every 2 years, depending who is making a better offer. This should be, at the end of the day, civilizational choice. And even if you don't receive positive remarks, coming sometimes from European officials, as my good friend Sandra mentioned here, this is not about one or another remark. This is about very difficult and hard work. So you must prove at the end of the day that you are very serious about your path towards Europe, regardless of those difficulties that you might have. I think when you look how to improve or increase the role of civil society, when you look at Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, I believe if you have association agreements, and if you have this perspective to work with regard to Europe, you have more opportunities for civil society. Let's be realistic. Let's say if there wouldn't be perspective for a visa-free regime with Moldova, and also for Georgia, it would be extremely difficult to pass, for example, the necessary legislation at the end of the day. So I'm not so much concerned about these three countries, because at the end of the day, when the European Union has a hook, and they have a hook on these countries, so they can demand reforms, you must carry out reforms, so you have more opportunities for civil society. At the same time, those countries which are not seeking European integration, at this moment this is Azerbaijan and Belarus, the situation in Armenia is much, much better. But in case of Azerbaijan and Belarus, the European Union has very little how to influence the situation on the ground, because the governments themselves are not willing to move towards Europe. And I think we do not have a good reply on how to tackle with this issue. I have always believed, but this is very controversial, if more engagement we have with these respective governments, more opportunities we have also to improve the situation in the field of human rights. Because if Azerbaijan and Belarus need something from Europe at the end of the day, so we have some instruments how to influence them. Yes, it's not always successful. We have been unable to release the 3 or 6 political prisoners in Belarus at the same time, but I believe that the dialogue with these governments and very patient work at the end of the day could pay off. And my last point would be, we have not discussed here the big elephant in the room, but we know whom we mean. I think at the end of the day, what is very important also for these countries, and Eastern Partnership was not suited, for example, to tackle the issue of security. This is about strengthening independence and resilience of these countries. So we might end up in a very specific situation when in such countries like Belarus, the Belarusian government at one point might need very strong support from the Belarusian civil society as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very, very useful. Thank you. Questions and answers now. I think I can't see all of you, but if you wave your hands, maybe Mr. Adamczyk. Okay, so, well, Mr. Adamczyk, will you be brief?
I will try. I will try. Well, I'm Andrzej Adamczyk, and I represent the half that octopus of the European Economic and Social Committee, as Mr. Bobinski tried to describe it. Even worse, I represent a trade union, a Polish trade union, Solidarność. But if you come to Poland and try to convince Polish society that trade union Solidarność is not a part of civil society, it will be difficult to understand it, at least in Poland. Now, it is true that European Economic and Social Committee represents other interests, as Mr. Rybachuk described it, but also trade unions and employers. And those groups of stakeholders have legitimate right to represent their constituencies. And they can represent millions of members who are there, who are affiliated to those organizations. It is true that European Economic and Social Committee is a part of the network of European organizations. And the association agreement, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, their objective is to approximate European values, or to approximate, well, those countries to the European values and also to the network of European institutions. And I don't think that it's really useful to give lessons to European Union how they should organize their institutions. And the European Economic and Social Committee is included in the Rome Treaty, well, it really genuinely represents their constituencies. And of course, you know, it is an illusion that the transformation of partner countries can be performed without the participation of social partners, without the participation of employers and trade unions. This will be a very difficult transformation, and the more inclusive it is, the better will be its results. So, of course, you know, you may not be satisfied with trade unions and employers in Ukraine, but please do not try to exclude them from the process, rather try to reform them. We know them very well, and we know what are their drawbacks. We know their deficiencies very well, but the best way is not to exclude them from civil and social dialogue. The best way is to include them and try to reform them and work with them. That's what we are trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you don't want to? Do you want to? No, you've said, I think you've said. Okay, next speaker, Mr. Grigoryan, sorry. And then you.
Stepan Grigoryan, I am from Armenia. I have two questions, maybe proposals. First is connected with association agreement who signed 3 countries, and I listened many words about this. Maybe it will be right to do statement from our forum to EU commissions to start implementation process. You know about this process is frozen, and it will be need to push our governments and start the implementation. And second issue is connected with Nadezhda Savchenko. This is it's a new situation in post-Soviet territory. We have not only political prisoner, we have political hostage. It's a new situation, and I think we'll be right to do some statement from our forum. For me, it's interesting the position of our excellent speakers. And thank you, Mr. Ambassador, that you raised the issue connected with implementation of association agreement.
Thank you very much. Here. No, there.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Sergei Madadov from Azerbaijan, and thank you, everybody. Yesterday in Azerbaijan, we had a tragedy. There was one house was burnt down, and it was probably the very good opportunity for criticizing the government. I wanted to declare we haven't done it. Now in Azerbaijan, we have experienced some hardships, and now 4 our colleagues, they have been arrested. They are under investigation. Of course, but it doesn't mean that the civil society doesn't exist, and it's not true. We have 4,500 NGOs and 300 are defending civil rights, 111 foreign organizations in the country. But in the 19th, those activists of human rights, they were active. And now I sent 18 cases to the Court on Human Rights. My colleagues are also engaged in this process. And then to compare Azerbaijan to Belarus, who is just actually, it's like a subject of the Russian Federation. It's not just. Azerbaijan is the only country which resists to customs union. Thank you. I am representing
Foundation Ukraine. I need to make two reservations to the speaker from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Latvia. I trust that you were not expressing the official position of Latvia when you were saying that Crimea is not any part of Ukraine anymore. Sorry, but I personally come from Crimea, and this is an emotional issue. Crimea is a part of Ukraine. It continues to be a part of Ukraine despite military Russian occupation and illegal annexation. And I trust that Latvia's position is not changed here. And second point is that you mentioned the frozen conflict in Donbass. Unfortunately, it's not yet frozen. Maybe unfortunately, really, because still we don't have the ceasefire implemented. Every day we lose several people either killed or injured.
Okay, thank you. Then the man there who had the microphone before.
I'm representing the Respect International Organization of Netherlands. If we look at the list of participants of this conference, and we do not have members of the civil society from Spain, Greece, but their mentality is very close to Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia. I think that EU, they also participate in EU, and Erasmus Plus, it shows that many organizations of EU, including Norway, Greece, they also participate in different events in Georgia and Armenia. And maybe for organizations from Western interests, they should be interested in participating in such projects. The procedure of working within the frameworks of Eastern Partnership is very important. The civil society is an ally of EU, and civil society is the group of people who are involved in promoting democratic reforms in Azerbaijan, Georgia, and if we speak only 5% of funds is allotted to their allies, but it prevents democratic reforms. It hinders the international projects which could be between our countries and EU. That's why I would like to ask Prime Minister of Latvia and our partners that you should change the procedure is in Eastern Partnership, that more and more countries and NGO from European Union, they should take active part in our partnership.
Окей. Моє ім'я Антоніця Фонак.
Антоніця Фонак, as the General Secretary of NGO, that is Consilium of Moldova. We have I'm doing some volunteer work in some councils. I was very glad to participate here. It's to be in the company of Prime Minister, but I would like to pose some questions in my head. I do not know the answers. You mentioned that people who work in syndicates who are dinosaurs, so-called, and that is also my way of thinking. I'm referring to trade unions. They do not represent people. It's not, but I think they are very similar to NGOs because membership fees are paid, and if memberships are paid, but those people, they use luxury cars and planes, that is, maybe they represent people who are paid. And those, they people who live in our countries. But we are not paid membership fees because we do not have any forces behind us. We have some people, maybe 2 or 3, maybe an auditor, a bookkeeper, but we have to pose a question: what is our position? But we are citizens who are ready to fight. In Moldova, we have some councils who are very successful in their work, and we had some recommendation from Brussels to implement some changes. That is especially the question of integration, and now we have not 2 platforms, but we have already 4 platforms, because the same people, they go to different TV shows and they make presentations about Euro integrations, and later they do not have any time to draw projects. And that's why my idea is that when we invite people, I think half of them, or maybe more, who will place upload photos of this conference, all their selfies in Riga. They will have no time to go to journalists because they are very busy of going to different conferences. So that's why we have to think about the quality of our NGOs.
I'm Murman Margolashvili. I'm representative from Georgia. And I have a question regarding the elephant in the room and how serious we're taking it. My personal understanding is that offensive and conflict is not limited to Ukraine, that it is going in all other Eastern Partnership countries, and it takes the form of ideological and information offensive, as well as use of soft power in these countries, and to a great extent the percentage of people who are willing to join Eurasian Union that Mr. Ambassador mentioned is a result of this real, serious, planned work. So my question is, how serious do we take this factor? And do we think it can be neglected, or we should do something about it?
Thank you very much. There's a question here or a comment here. The back of the room is very quiet. Oh, there's a hand there. Good. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bobinski. I'm Razi Nurullayev, represent Region International Analytical Center, and I also come from Azerbaijan. I have 4 points, very brief. Of course, you have enumerated civil side of problems in Azerbaijan. That is reality. You have enumerated, and there are several calls, not here, but from other conferences and from other sources, that Azerbaijan should be excluded from Council of Europe, or the EU should stop the negotiation process on association agreement with Azerbaijan. But I think that is not the solution. Then the EU loses the dialogue. So at least today, Azerbaijan authorities can sit at the table and discuss. But maybe after collapse of Soviet Union or in Soviet time, that was not possible either with Russia or with other Soviet republics. But that is the best thing when you have a chance to negotiate and try to persuade. And this situation would also work for Azerbaijan at this moment. Second, of course, we all try and put all our efforts that Azerbaijan should sign the association agreement with the European Union. However, as we see today, and we can witness tomorrow, Azerbaijan is not going to sign the association agreement. And one reason would be, maybe that is an excuse, maybe pretext, but that is the fact that Ukraine lost its territorial integrity, and the EU was not able to defend its territorial integrity. And if Azerbaijan signed the association, and that is also was voiced by several high-ranking officials in Azerbaijan, then Azerbaijan would face the fate of Ukraine. So at the south and north of Azerbaijan, the ethnic conflicts or other conflicts would emerge. So the Azerbaijan would face other 2 biggest problems after Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. So if there was any guarantee or anything else, then that would deprive not only Azerbaijan but also the other countries from using that excuse. But it is not excuse at this moment, I would say, as coming from Azerbaijan. That is a real threat that may come from Russia. Third, I've been in many talks, and I always saw that Azerbaijan authorities, whatever the EU representatives try to persuade the Azerbaijan side to sign the association agreement or respect for human rights and democracy, etc., the Azerbaijan side would raise the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And that is also the case with civil side. We are always raising Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And then whatever the other side, the EU side, tries again to bring the other issues on agenda, but it won't work. So what happens here, the EU has a clear vision on Georgia, on Ukraine, and has recognized its territorial integrity, and has a clear vision and view on those conflicts. But regarding Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and Azerbaijan, EU has some not a clear say. So if the EU has a clear say on Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and about Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, that would also accelerate the Azerbaijan involvement with the EU and, of course, rapprochement with the EU. These 4 points that I have raised, and the last, sorry, I think that there also should be some incentives for countries like Azerbaijan to be interested in joining the EU. For example, Mrs. Sandra Kalniete said for more and less for less. That is the option, and that is the choice or the concept from the EU. But at this moment, Azerbaijan doesn't want for more and less for less, doesn't care about it. But then, at this case, so Azerbaijan doesn't need anyone from EU. And at this point, Azerbaijan thinks that it has oil and gas and it can export it to European Union. And it is not interested in the CFTA because Azerbaijan imports oil and gas and can do it. So what could be other incentives for countries like Azerbaijan to get its interest for the EU accession? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a very pertinent point. What I think we'll do is we'll take the speaker right at the back with his hand up, and then the lady there, and we'll come back to the panel, and then we'll get the remaining speakers. Which is your first?
Thank you very much. I am Akif Kurbanov, Institute for Democratic Initiatives from Azerbaijan.
If you're going to say the same thing, please don't. If you just say you agree with the previous speaker.
No.
You don't want to agree with the previous speaker. Good.
First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for organizers and also for speakers, especially Bialiatski for his sincerely speech, and his speech describes our reality. I would like to mention that the situation is getting worse and worse each day, and the atmosphere of fear is increasing each day. And I can say that serious blackmailing campaign is being conducted against the civil society representatives, and it's conducted by the government persons, which for example, I can say that we heard from, for example, Assistant of President said that, and this campaign called that civil society membership as fifth columns of the West. In this situation, also I can add that the issue of political prisoners still remain in this situation, and I can say that the last list consists of around 85 members, political prisoners. In this situation, I have a question. What do you think in that tension situation, how could be strategic partner civil society? And civil society, what could be a role of civil society in our country's national policies? What do you think? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I apologize for my remark about you saying the same thing as the previous speakers. There's a lady there, and then here. Okay, but
hello, everyone. My name is Rasma Pīpiķa, and I'm representing Civic Alliance Latvia. This is one of the largest umbrella organizations in Latvia. And unfortunately, it seems like today civil society is represented by politician, Sandra Kalniete, and ambassador from Latvia. But I want to say real thanks to our guests from other countries who kind of highlighted what is the situation in their countries. And also, I want to say that civil society is not obliged to listen what politicians point out them to do. I want to say that civil society, for many years, also in this region, have written reports about real situation of civil society organizations. And unfortunately, this is paid not by those countries' governments. It is paid by other countries' governments. And I want to say, maybe I will not have opportunity during this conference, that Latvia has a lot of things to offer to the developing countries, to the Eastern Partnership countries, because we have achieved in our advocacy and also in our participation, civil society participation on government's level, in parliamentarians level quite a lot during the last 10 years, since we are in 15 years. We are also in EU. We have a special memorandum of understanding between government. Every month we meet with the governmental officials and we discuss issues that are important for civil society. It's been many times that laws have been put back to the civil servants to revise them, to rewrite them. And this is really the instrument which is working on a regular basis. We have also different kind of tools for organizational capacity building for your organizations in your countries, for civil society. I know a lot of grassroots organizations which are regularly meeting with their partners in quite difficult circumstances. We have Resource Center Marta, who has established Resource Center for Women in Azerbaijan. And I think these are the examples we have to be highlighting during this kind of conferences. And we also have instruments for advocacy. Of course, we haven't gone through war in that meaning nowadays. But I want to say that each civil society group which is fighting for some kind of group of people sometimes have to go through kind of war with politicians. And I think we have these tools, and I hope that during this conference we can discuss in much more details what kind of tools we can offer to you. And welcome to Latvia. We are very glad that you are here and can enjoy this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We have two questions on the floor, but I think we'll go back to the panel now because we have some time. So maybe we'll go in the same order. So, Ms. Kalniete, if you...
Yeah, thank you. There are so many issues raised, and I will try to answer to few to leave uncovered areas to my panel colleagues. Of course, it's true, non-governmental organizations absolutely are not obliged to listen what politicians and governments point out to them. And happily, Latvia is over that stage, and no politician in Latvia, no serious politician in Latvia would dare even to criticize non-governmental organization on their effort to ameliorate the legislation and to voice their concerns regarding this or that issue. I would like to pick out from several comments the expression which just in a way irritated me. What really EU wants, what EU demands, what EU expects, and so on. EU does not expect whatever. Everything is in your own hands. When during Orange Revolution, a delegation from United States went to Ukraine, and they were listening to the complaints, Yanukovych time, to the complaints of NGOs about the situation in Ukraine. At the end of the head of the delegation asked, what are you going to do about it? And NGOs were really upset because they thought, and this is something what I heard also in your intervention, they really thought that Americans, or in our case European Union, will come in and will resolve the situation. However, I have to distinguish between the situation in countries like Moldova, Georgia and Ukraine, where civil society is vibrant and growing, and those countries like Belarus and Azerbaijan, where, speaking in the words of Hannah Arendt, no true political option is left. In that situation, of course, the international community is of great assistance for moral support and also for financial support. And as I said, whenever I'm speaking with Commissioner Hahn, I'm advocating a greater financial piece of cake from Eastern Partnership budget to support of local NGOs, not all those very skillful international NGOs who are able to subsist without that much of support. And finally, what also is quite natural in the discussion what we had or the comments, that we are not so much speaking about the role of civil society, its achievements. We are dominated by the subject of international order, foreign relations. And it also reflects the very difficult period we all together are going through. And that's why I would suggest that one of the roles of Eastern Partnership countries and civil societies in these countries is to build a bond with Western NGOs. Why do we need that? Representative from Netherlands organization, he indicated clearly there are no representatives from Spain, Italy, and so on. There is a lack of understanding in civil societies in Western Europe about the particular situation in which Eastern Partnership finds itself, and the difficulties NGOs in Eastern and civil society is facing in Eastern Partnership. And that would be a sort of educational effort, because people-to-people contact can raise considerably the understanding what are the real problems. You were saying that ECOSOC does not really understand what it is about, but this is quite natural, because if we look vice versa, in many Eastern Partnership countries, and not only, for instance, in Japan, and even in the United States, politicians and even more society is not able to understand how European Union functions. What does it mean, integration? So that knowledge could be exchanged. And this is my wish to you, that you are more active in building international dimension and advocating the needs of your countries.
Just like, you know, stationary warning when you say, when you go on any political talk show and the editors say that whatever this guy says does not reflect official position of the entity. So whatever I say may not reflect my official position, but I am joking here. I am here in two capacities. And I started from that. I was Deputy Prime Minister and know more than average Ukrainian how Brussels functions on government level. And around 8 years, I am civil society activist and know how it works out. So all my remarks about ECOSOC are probably shared by, if not absolute, but then majority of Ukrainian activists present here. I know this definitely, because I talk to them. I don't know about other countries. And this is not that I criticize. Obviously, I do not criticize. What I am saying is that Solidarność is Poland was the driving force of changes. Trade union. Trade union in Ukraine, as well as employers, have been never part of non-government. They are always humble servants of government, whatever government is there, or whatever regime is there. This is the reality. And by the way, about fees or memberships, you know, if you are a civil servant, you don't pay trade union fees. They deduct it from your salary. So that's a slightly different approach. So when you speak about millions members, come on. Either we speak frankly or we waste our time here. But so there are civil societies and civil societies. There are trade unions and trade unions. There are NGOs and NGOs. But again, majority of people who came with me today, they've been very much there during Euromaidan, where we saw no trade unions, we saw no political opposition. They've been good for nothing. They didn't know what to do with 1 million people coming to the street. So there was no leadership. There were real people, not even civil society is not a network of NGOs, but practically all people present here have been there, not representing their NGOs, but being there with students, with parents who protested against their kids brutally beaten by police, and again, trade unions or employers who could have organized massive rallies, never do that. But now they come back again, and Mr. Firtash is projecting himself as author and major opponent of Yanukovych, being supporter of him. So that's something which must be emphasized. So my personal approach is very pragmatic. If I see that my time and my being here as part of this gathering has added value, I will go on. If I see that I am driven into never-ending definition why we are on this earth, what have we to do, what EU can do, then I know that I can spend these 2 days much more efficient in my country. Thank you.
Okay, don't go. Please don't go. Don't leave us. But thank you for stopping. Mr. Bialiatski, please.
I would like to make some remarks of my roundtable discussion partner. That the time will come when the Belarus government will support the civil society in the country. It's really fiction, because if we speak about the threat to independence of Belarus, but as it was mentioned, that this question is also very topical also for Azerbaijan. I see that our government it doesn't see the civil society as an ally to them, and what is done by our government, there are military exercises on the border with Russia and Poland. There are military bases of Russia in Belarus. For example, near Bobruisk, we have 2 military Russian planes, and already from early morning they were flying over our heads. So actually it is 10 minutes from our border. Now the question, and if, for example, there is a conflict in Ukraine, will such planes will cover the distance? And to Ukraine, that is quite understandable. That's why the independence of our countries depends on the relations, or those unions, associations which we build. And thanks to Mr. Lukashenko, we have a lot of military and economic agreements with Russia. And I think those who will betray our independence, those they are our government. The next question about information attacks. If we analyze and see the programs of Russian TV, you can go crazy. And in spring, just when I was in prison, we were watching TV programs and just Russian programs, and then you do not know what is real. It's like just propaganda of the Goebbels times, and we have to stop such activities. And if in Latvia it could be done using legal means, and it should be done. For example, you can advocate pornography or violence, so that's why you can't advocate this kind of activities. But in countries of Eastern partnerships, the emphasis should be paid on independent press media who give an alternative information, like in Belarus. We had internet site which is followed by thousands of people. We have also an independent radio station, but such projects of independent information sources in our country, it should be supported. That's why the role of Eastern Partnership in this respect is very low. That's why we have to support this activity. So we shouldn't make it as a Russian-speaking project because the situation in our countries is different. So it could be just one information agency, or it could be just a common agency where independent TV station could get information, but it should be in 6 languages only. This will help to prevent information campaign which comes from Russia.
Forum media group working with Memo 98 from Slovakia did monitoring of Russian current affairs programs in March. And the results of that monitoring is on the EAP, Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum website. But basically it shows that what you were saying, and it says that Russia is telling its people that they are in danger, they are the subjects of a plot, and that the West is out to get them, the West meaning the USA. And so that's something that I recommend. Mr. Poikāns, please.
Thank you. Let me address first the issue of Ukraine. When I was speaking about Ukraine, I was implying factual changes on the ground, naturally. The position of Latvia on the annexation of the Crimea is absolutely clear and has been mentioned many, many times. I hope I mentioned nearly frozen conflict in Donbass, which a bit differs from frozen conflict. Understandably, there is sporadic fighting taking place and people are dying, and clearly the implementation of Minsk agreements is the key to peace in this country. Okay, fighting is taking place. When it comes to Azerbaijan, let me express condolences, naturally, for this tragedy which took place yesterday in Baku. Sorry for forgetting that. And I would refer to what my colleague said here. I'm definitely against excluding Azerbaijan from any international organizations, because with that, you are losing platforms of communication and engagement. Clearly, the progress in the field of human rights in Azerbaijan is absolutely insufficient. But if you don't have these formats for cooperating and expressing and raising your concerns, so you are using another platform in engaging at the same time with Azerbaijan, I don't believe civil society in Azerbaijan will start to prosper if Azerbaijan will be excluded from one or another organization. My Georgian colleague here mentioned on the big elephant in the room. I think we don't have a clear reply. We don't have any short-term solution how to deal with this issue when it comes to Russia. I think what is the most important, what I was mentioning here, is to strengthen resilience and independence of these countries. So we must carry out together reforms, and we must do it as fast as possible. Clearly, the Eastern Partnership was not effective in tackling some issues like security, so it was not prepared for war-type situations in Ukraine. So we are learning probably on the spot. But I don't see anything else what we can do at this moment. We must work together with Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, with other countries of the Eastern Partnership at the end of the day, trying to improve the situation as much as possible, trying to reduce the possible pressure on these countries. And I would finish here with what my colleague Sandra said. I think the key is to understand about the Eastern Partnership is not really about what the European Union expects or wants. The European Union expects you to define what you want from the European Union and what you want to define in relations with the European Union. This is your choice. This is not a geopolitical competition with Russia or any other state on this. And we believe that 6 countries, as sovereign entities, can decide best, without outside influence, what is best in their interests.
Thank you very much. Now, I promised the lady here, very briefly, because we're running out of time, and then Artur Saguns after. And we'll finish the discussion.
Thank you very much. Olena Pristaika, very briefly, I don't have a question. I just want to thank everyone for an excellent kickoff of the discussion of the whole day. And I just would echo those who already addressed all of us, all our participants. So if we want to change, we have to change ourselves. We have to make us better, stronger, learn from each other, and also to push from within the country, but also use more and more international arena. And I'm speaking not about the European Union as well, but also Council of Europe, UN, WTO, push our governments to make joint efforts to tackle our joint threats, namely Russia. Thank you very much, and I wish everyone an excellent days of work.
Okay, and now Artur Sugut from Armenia.
Спасибо, Артур.
Thank you, Arthur, from the. I am representing Armenia. I would like to refer to some issues, and I would like to know your opinion. Is it possible that political leaders can influence for just a decision? Well, in my country, we do not have political leaders because everybody wants to make influence. But those leaders, political leaders, they do not listen to our civil society. Politicians, they are not listening to what is the problem. And usually EU works with those higher rank officials. So as you see, EU, they are listening to us. I don't know how efficient it is. It leaves much to be desired to be more efficient, this cooperation. But the former European Commission, they proved that they were not listening to what is happening in Armenia, but they continue to work with those politicians, so bad politicians. We have 15 political prisoners, and they use violence, and they try. There are crackdowns on our political movements, and Armenia is maybe situation is a bit different than in Armenia, in Azerbaijan, but we are really afraid that our situation will be very similar that in Belarus and Azerbaijan. That's why the position of EU is very important. We understand that it is not one just a united body. That's why their position referring to human rights is very important. We do not have one platform to understand what is the EU is. So we have internal threats because our governments are not accountable before our people. They need only funding from EU. But EU uses funding to get that under control, but we do not see real changes. It could be even deteriorate. We do also EU position as to threats from Russia. We have clearly declared that by avoiding such threats from Russia, our future development is impossible. We have to make a statement because those threats to Ukraine, so also threats to Armenia, referring to our military base. But we can't change. Who is going to listen? You are working with Armenian authorities. I am addressing EU representative. So we have to develop, to include it into your strategy. I would like to develop our strategy towards Russia. I do not want us to see in a position which happens in Belarus and now in Azerbaijan. Armenia is under threat. Thank you.
We have run out of time. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Sandra Kalniete, you're going to have to reply to Artur.
I understand your frustration, because from outside it's really difficult to understand how European Union takes its decision. And it lies in the construction of the Union. That difficulty reflects it. Because European Union is union of national states. And each national state has its own right and understanding of its national interests. And taking into account that, you have to understand what enormous success it is that we are able to come between 28 up with a common position. Neither those who are on the softer flank or those who are on the sharper flank are entirely satisfied with that position. The fact that sanctions were introduced against Russia after the annexation of Crimea and aggression in Ukraine is a very strong signal. There are countries wanting to revise that regime, but finally again the Council came up with a unanimous decision that sanctions will be in place until the Minsk ceasefire number 2 will be entirely implemented. Still, the question exists, what will be the interpretation of understanding it's entirely implemented? That will be the object of discussion. Another issue, what I would like to raise, is about the propaganda and counter-propaganda. Counter-propaganda is a very negative action and word. This is not what European Union is going to do. We are seriously discussing something else that we consider in our budget to allocate considerable amount of money for the creation of powerful instrument, a TV channel which would broadcast in Russian language on the same formula like Al Jazeera or Russia Today, where considerable part is entertainment and another part is about local communities. You know that that would be also of great assistance for Eastern Partnership countries, because that will raise the understanding how European Union lives, what each and every man and woman experiences in the Union, what are their social problems, their economic problems, and what are the benefits of being together in the European Union.
Thank you very much. Coffee break, come back at 11:30. Thank you.